Good afternoon or good morning, everyone, depending on where you're at. I'm Dave Carter with Flower Hill Institute, and we're going to wait just a minute here while people come in out of the waiting room before we get started. So just hang with us for a minute of awkward silence here. All right, looks like we're getting most of the folks in, so we'll go ahead and get started. As I said, I'm Dave Carter, Regional Director for Flower Hill Institute. I usually do these roundtables with my fellow regional director, Chris Roper, but he's a victim of the airline schedules today, so is stuck on an airplane. So I'm flying solo, but we've got two great folks here with us this morning to cover the topic of product of the USA. And before we get started, just want to do a couple of housekeeping details. This is being recorded, so it will be on our website. We archive all of our roundtables so people can go in and download them and see them if they weren't able to attend. Um, Secondly, please ask questions as we go along, but when you do, put it into the Q&A box, not the chat, into the Q&A, and I'll be monitoring that as we go along. And when those come in, then we'll pass them along. So when we get done this afternoon, you'll get a two-question survey. Just very quickly, what did you think of the session that we had? And number two, what are some suggestions you'd like to see us cover in future roundtables? Chris and I are always looking for topics that are of interest to the smaller meat and poultry processors that we serve. So with that, I am really excited because this has been a topic that has been brewing for several years, and that is product of the USA. And so really pleased to have Beth McHugh from USDA Food Safety and an Inspection Service, and Annette, and is it Anston or Amstein?
Stein.
Amstein. I did it both wrong both ways from Mitten Marketing. So uh, just first of all, I guess provide some brief introduction. So Danette, you're on camera, so yeah, go ahead and start.
All right, Dave, thank you for the opportunity. Welcome, everyone. I hope that you find this time to be incredibly valuable use of your time as we talk about this really important call out that we can put on packages now. As Dave said, I'm Danette Amstein. I'm the president of Miden Marketing, and we've been around for about 21 years now, really focused in the meat space. We also do ag and other food. But meat is our bullseye. And the reason for that is I'm a farm girl from Southwest Kansas. So I grew up on a vertically operation that includes cow calf through backgrounding as well as row crop operation. And so I've always been about how can I make our cattle at home worth more? And one of the ways to do that is to make sure that they are relevant to the consumer. So I've spent my career on the marketing side of helping the meat industry grow and understand what it is the consumer wants to know, and then carrying that information back to the meat industry. So both working both ends of that. So that's where I enjoy spending my time in brand building and in helping meat packers and processors and brands really resonate with consumers.
It's great. This is so timely because just about a month ago, there was the annual meat conference where a lot of new consumer research came out. And I know a lot of the folks on the Miden marketing team were there. So lots to talk about. Beth, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Okay, thanks, Dave. I'm Dr. Beth McHugh. I'm currently the acting deputy director of the labeling and program delivery staff within the Office of Policy and Program Development at FSIS. So I've been with FSIS for more than 19 years. I started out as a public health veterinarian at several small and very small livestock and slaughter and processing establishments up in Northwest Pennsylvania. I relocated to Washington, D.C. To help start up the FSIS Small Plant Help Desk back in 2008. And then I've been with labeling since 2013. And one of my specialties, I am the staff expert on Product of USA. And if you're interested in these things, I'm from New Hampshire. I graduated undergrad from Rice University in Houston, Texas, DVM from Michigan State. So I've been bouncing around there. I work in downtown DC, and I live in a little more rural area in Frederick, Maryland. I'm happy to be here today. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks to both of you for being here. Um, First of all, yeah, Beth, this whole idea of product of the USA has been a point of frustration in previous years, and there's a long process. So, guess start out with just a little bit of the evolution of where we're at right now. Yep.
Sure. So the current version originated. The current version that's in play right now that we're going to talk about, that we're all excited about, started. It was between 2018 and 2021. FSIS received 3 petitions from various industry associations regarding our definition at the time of product of USA in our policy book. And you may recall it was a little more flexible in that, really, as long as that last processing step occurred in the US, product could be labeled product of USA. And that meant that the meat could be imported and still bear product of USA. So we got 3 petitions, asked us to take a closer look and consider redefining and amending the regulations to define product of USA. And so we, as a result of these surveys, we did a survey ourselves. We had a third party do a consumer survey to kind of get the gist of what folks thought product of USA meant. And no surprise, the results were not, they were not consistent with what our policy book said. So we published a final rule in 2023 to sort of bring our definition in line with consumer expectations, because, of course, we're about food safety, but we're also about, labeling being truthful and not misleading. So we had a proposed rule in 2023. 1 year later, in 2024, we published our final rule, and those regulations, which define product of USA, became effective just last January 1st in 2026.
Great, thank you. And Danette, why is this important? What's happening in the marketplace that people are looking for this?
Well, Dave, as we discussed, I'm going to talk all about the consumer, because that's really what it moves things on our end of the spectrum, and what we need to pay attention to. And Beth is right. When you ask consumers what product of the USA means, they had a very distinct idea of that didn't align with what our regulation was at the time. And depending on your group of consumers, the importance of it can mean different things. But first, there are consumers out there that are very claim oriented, and they are looking for those claims to either align with their values and their morals, or to align with how they want to eat. And knowing if their values align with product of the USA, knowing that it's truly from the USA and that they're supporting US farmers and ranchers is incredibly important to them.
And Biden has kind of identified some segments of the shopping public, so to speak. And when we talked the other day, you mentioned a couple of them where this really fits in.
Yeah, we've been doing consumer segmentation work and consumer surveys since about 2016, specifically with meat and poultry consumers. So those that are buying and eating our product. And the desire of that was to understand what really resonates with them, what's really important to them, and how to best communicate to them, because we are a marketing firm, so messaging is very important. That throughout the years, we used to have 6 segments. It's now settled in we're in our 3rd version of the segmentation. We'll actually field our 4th study early next year. But this 3rd one's come down to 5 groups of consumers, from a range of consumers that are very interested in knowing things, and you can influence their habits in meat and poultry, to the far end of the spectrum where they're the classic meat and potato folks, and you're probably not going to get them to change much at all. But those first 2 segments, the connected trendsetters, think younger consumers, think those that are really interested to what's happening on their phone, think those that are really interested in adventurous eating. They are interested in knowing what's happening. They read labels, they pay attention to it. Having a product of the USA label will say something to them and mean something to them. The next group of consumers I just briefly touched on, and that was claim seekers. They're making decisions based on what they find on the label or what they find on brand websites or product websites. And so knowing where it comes from, how it's raised, what it's fed become very important to them, and they make their purchase decisions based on that.
And in terms of some of the demographics, where do they skew in terms of Gen Z, millennial, boomers? Yeah.
Yeah, so those first, the connected trendsetters and the climb seekers skew younger than, say, a boomer, but that doesn't mean there aren't boomers in those groups. So segments aren't about generations or demographics, it's really about lifestyle and behaviors and attitudes. So while they skew younger, connected trendsetters typically are those that don't necessarily have as many children as home, but are interested in time and with family and friends. Claim seekers typically skew a little bit more female and also more they have a family that they're feeding every night at the dinner table and paying attention to what they're feeding them.
Okay, great. Well, we'll get into that a little deeper here as we go along. But Beth, I want to get back to some of the regulatory things. I think it's fairly cut and dried if you're just cutting and wrapping meat and putting a ribeye into a consumer ready package. But how does this break down when there are other things involved in the label or in the product?
You're asking for you want to talk about the requirements for Productive
Yeah,
USA, right?
yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. So just before I just touch upon those, I just want to make two comments. One is from a regulatory perspective, the claim is voluntary, so it's not mandatory. It's a voluntary claim. And the good news is that these claims, Productive USA, Made in the USA, they do not require approval by the labeling and program delivery staff. So, um, you know, label approval takes a little bit of time to submit to our office and get it approved, and that would not be a factor in this claim. So, Product of USA. Slightly different set of criteria between single ingredient and multi-ingredient products, but it does apply to both. So for single ingredient products, all the meat or poultry used needs to have been born, raised, and slaughtered and processed in the USA. So no imported meat, must be totally born, raised, slaughtered, and processed in the USA. And documentation needs to be available to support that. For multi-ingredient products, it's the same requirements for the meat and poultry, born, raised, and slaughtered and processed in the US. And then all ingredients other than spices and flavorings need to be of domestic origin. Yeah, so those are the requirements. In reg speak, it's 9 CFR 412.3A for single ingredient and B for multi-ingredient. I work for the government, so I have to throw those out there. It's just I'm hardwired to do that.
Well, you mentioned the documentation is required. What kind of documentation will, particularly from a processor standpoint? Yeah.
So when we wrote, I would get this question a lot, and when we wrote the regulation, we left it really wide open because we know that a small plant. When I was in the field, I worked at I covered as a veterinarian establishments that would slaughter 3 cattle a day, and we know there's a huge range in volume and record keeping. So producer affidavits are one way for the establishment. Really the documentation is very, very flexible. I think key though for that establishment, you need support from your suppliers of your animals, but also in plant, you need that sort of, we call it a segregation protocol. So if you're labeling some animals Product of USA and some not Product of USA, how do you keep that separate so you could ensure that when you put that label on Product of USA, your source material is Product of USA. So there's two, you need support for the animals and also support for your in-plant controls.
Okay, very good. And then Danette, back to you when so you have this on the label, Product of the USA, but what kind of messaging is important to reach out to those claim seekers or the folks that really look for that? What can be helpful?
I encourage everyone to back that up with what they're putting on their website or their social sites. Not just putting it on the label, but tell the stories behind it. To Beth's point, if it's a very small a processor, you're only doing a couple head a day, you know who those cattle are from. So providing stories about where that's from or using pictures of actual producers, that resonates with the American public because they are, as I said earlier, they really very much want to support American farmers and ranchers. So wherever you can tell the story about what you're doing, why you're doing it, how you're doing it, that is incredibly helpful in gaining loyalty for your products.
So if people think, okay, I'm going to put this label on my package and my sales are really going to go up, that's not the only thing that people are looking for. What are some of the other attributes that you found that are really, really important?
Yeah, Dave, we've done some beef attributes research in the last couple of years to really ask consumers what they're looking for. And that obviously changes based on what their budget is, what's important to them health-wise. But I'll just take quality as an example. When we ask consumers, what helps you know that the product that you are purchasing is high quality or is the quality level you're looking for? The number one answer is always USDA grade. So they're looking for whether it's prime or choice. They're looking for those answers. Product of the USA actually comes in the top five, as does all natural and no added hormones or growth hormones. So if you look at the top five, that's kind of the range of what people are using to help discern what quality means to them and help make their decisions on what's going to put in their cart and ultimately what they're going to feed their family.
So you mentioned the grade standards. I'll make a shout out here or a reference to we have a webinar, a roundtable that's on our website that we did about a month ago, uh, updating folks on the USDA's remote grading program, which is a great program that smaller processors can now use to put that grade stamp on there. So if you're curious about that, you can go onto our website or drop me an email and I'll send you the link for that. We have a question that came in here from Nathan. He says, if we are buying cattle to finish, what kind of documentation is required to verify that those cattle were born and raised in the USA? Beth, that's kind of in your court.
I mean, we don't require specific documentation. I mean, if you bought the cattle, however you can get that from your supplier. It could be birth records, it could be affidavits. I mean, we wrote those regs to provide maximum flexibility. But if you're standing behind the claim that I bought this animal and it was born and raised here until before I got it, whatever kind of support you can get, you need that, because then you're going to have to support that you also, raise the animal for a period of time on, and then both of those documentations will need to go over to the slaughter facility, because ultimately at the end of the day, it's the slaughter facility that needs the support on file, right, for the claim.
And just as a clarification, because I know a lot of folks talk about, well, affidavits, don't mean anything, but there is a legal authority on if somebody were to challenge something that was backed up by an affidavit. Um, there's a standard of truth. I don't know if your expertise goes into that or not.
I don't. I'm not an attorney. I mean, yeah. I mean, so we think they mean something, but yeah, I don't really have much more to say than about that.
Okay. And I know USDA's got some resources that they put out there on a website. Now, talk a little bit about people that are interested in this, and we'll have a QR code at the end of the roundtable here that people can track onto. Yeah.
Yeah, so we have some information available in our FSAS guideline for label approval. That's a sort of a general guideline that has information about what kind of labels need approval, what kind don't. And we've updated throughout that document with information, making some clarifications on different aspects of Product of USA, sort of clarifying definitions, and giving some examples of documentation. But again, they're just examples. There's nothing specific. And I think you're going to have a link at the end of the webinar. The department, so not FSIS, but the department has a big promotion right now for Product of USA, and they've produced pretty fancy little website, and they've got an example of a label you can use you can apply to your product. if you meet the requirements. But you don't have to use that slick color label. You can, it's a resource for you. But really, product of USA, no matter how you print it, no matter what the font, no matter the color, it has meaning. And so, yeah.
So you can come up with your own design that matches
Sure.
your logo
Yep.
and whatever. It's not like the organic seal, which is,
Correct. Yeah, it's not prescriptive. You can design your own, but in an effort to promote product of USA, the department did provide, for those that want to use it, there a sample sticker with the flag and product of USA.
great. But just a
Dave,
reminder,
I
if
would
you have
I
some
would encourage
questions,
folks to use what USDA provided simply because the more consumers see it the same way every time, then it begins to mean something for them. And when the majority of people use it one way and then you see it differently somewhere else, it just causes us to go, wait, is that real or is that something else? So if there's a way to incorporate what USDA has provided, I really encourage folks to do that.
uh, very good point. That's excellent. Just again, folks, if you have questions, put it into the Q&A here. While I kind of monitor that, Danette, while you're still on camera here, I mentioned that there was the annual meat conference here about a month ago, and a lot of information about some of the trends that are important for this. What are some of the other things, that kind of not just the product of the USA, but some other trends that are really important for particularly smaller processors?
Dave, as you know, we talked a lot about protein because protein is the hottest thing going on in food. And while there are a lot of things that make it difficult to be in the meat industry right now, that is one of the high points for us, is the consumer's desire for protein. And there also, with that, unfortunately, comes confusion on what is good protein for our bodies and that our bodies can truly use, the bioavailable protein, and protein that you're now finding in cereal and protein bars that our bodies can't really absorb and use as well. So we had a lot of conversations. Some of the most fascinating ones were about protein as medicine, as food as medicine, and really how it can help heal the body. A lot of conversation about that. Also, some celebrating going on with the demand, with consumer demand that has stayed very strong for all the proteins. And we're even seeing growth in demand for lamb right now, which is something that we haven't really seen in this country for a while. So there's a lot of fantastic things that are happening. We wish, of course, there were more cattle right now because that would help with pricing. But that's a long-term fix that we all have to be working on. So I think really those are two of the main areas. Certainly the outlook talked about where consumers are expected to be going and where they may be pulling back. We're seeing this, kind of K-shaped economy in the fact that you've got consumers who are very budget conscious, and that same consumer at a different time and or different time of the week or time of the month might be the one actually choosing to indulge a little bit. Maybe not eating out as much, but looking for the higher end premium cuts at home. So we're seeing more of the K shape in how the consumer is doing things. The bridge to that, though, is also convenience products. So if you've ever been confused by why the consumer does what the consumer does, now is a good time to be confused because it doesn't all line up neat and perfect like it used to. We've got more segments, we've got more things consumers are looking for, more niches for everyone to put their product into, and more opportunities for storytelling.
It's great. And your comment about lamb triggered a question from Claire. What about the demand or market for goat meat?
Also growing nicely. In fact, we saw a few different goat products that were featured during the trade show. Some nice goat bites and some other things that were featured that were quite tasty.
I was with you on that. Yeah, they were pretty delicious.
Yeah.
So, folks, if you don't have any more questions, we may wrap this one up early today here. But I think the product of the USA is a really valuable label. Is Danette has talked. There are consumers out there that this really, really means something on. I see some folks on here today that have been working on this for years. I'll just give a shout out, Mike Calgrade. I saw he was on here, and I've worked with Mike for years. And the previous definition was a frustration to many of us. So I think we are happy to see this label come about. Um, just Beth, anything else you want to let people know about the? Oh, wait a second. Now we got some questions coming in. People want to ask them. So Cecilia wants to know, what are the additional most influential labels? I think they're talking about grass-fed, organic. What are the really um, important labels that can make that point of difference?
Yeah, well, keep in mind, Cecilia, that it depends on who you're marketing to. The survey we did was of general consumers, so it's going to pick out the things that are most important to most consumers. Grass-fed did not make the top of that list. However, as I talked about the claim seeker, that claim seeker consumer segment, grass-fed is important to a slice of that. So it really depends on who you're marketing to. There are some regionality differences. Certainly, as we get into where what animals are fed, one thing that has continued to be important to another segment of consumers is humane handling claims and how animals are taken care of. Certainly, for those of us in the industry, we know how important that is. But it really changes based on who you are targeting. What can be important to me might not be important to someone else. And I encourage everyone not to try to be everything to everyone. That gives us a label full of lots of stuff that is cluttered and confusing. But be really, really clear on who you want to go after and who you want to market your products to.
Great. And Tammy, up in South Dakota, she says, we're starting up a 150 head a day beef processing facility in South Dakota. How far in advance should we submit our label for USDA approval? And are we also going to be promoting the origin of labeling down to the farm? What are your best suggestions on how to do that? So, Beth, in terms of the time frame, uh, you can answer that. Yeah.
Yeah, right now, unfortunately, we're at about 25 to 26 business days. We were at about a week. We've had some resource issues over the last year, so we are labels are getting more complicated, and we've had some staffing issues. So I would definitely encourage you to give it about a month or so ahead of time. But just for the record, we are constantly striving to knock down that time. So it used to be about 3 to 5 days, and that's our goal, is to get it back there. But right now, it takes about a month.
Great. And then second part of that, I guess, is more in your wheelhouse, Danette. We're also going to be promoting the origin of labeling down to the farm. What are your best suggestions on how to do that?
Gather information and tell it as simple stories, photos, videos, use them in social posts, use them on your website. Allow your consumers to get to know your producers, because that is what really helps them want to continue to buy from you versus buy from someone else.
And I would also suggest that I've seen some people very effectively using QR codes on their packages. And I saw one product that they just had the QR code and they didn't say what it was, which I think could be kind of confusing. But others have put it on there saying, learn more about us, and there's a QR code that then while you're in the story, it'll take you right to the story of the farmers that supplied it. So I think that's very effective.
Agreed.
Clara has a question here. She says, what are the requirements for putting a call out on your label regarding grams of protein in a product? Beth, this is back in your court.
It is. And I'm not a nutrition expert, but number one, if you're going to put like an X grams of protein, 26 grams of protein per serving or whatever, that does require approval from FSIS. The good news is you just need one approval, and then you can sort of use that approval as support for other numbers on other products. So what do you need for that? You're going to have a nutrition facts panel, because if you're going to call out a specific nutrient, you have to have a nutrition facts panel on there. But if you've done your analysis, you've got your nutrition facts, that's really the only support you need. The nutrition facts panel supports the claim. The issue is we need to see one of those to make sure you include, per serving and it's not presented in conjunction with other claims that could make those other claims be interpreted as like a health claim. So it's really pretty basic. So a nutrition facts panel and submit one for approval, and you should be go to use X grams of protein on other labels.
And I know FSIS, at least I haven't looked at it lately, but had a library of nutrition, a database of nutrition. I know I was with the Bison Association for a gazillion years, and we worked to try and get more information on there that was the complete breakdown of various raw, cooked cuts of meat. So um, I'll I'll try and find that link if it's still
Yeah,
there and send
I
that
believe
out.
it's still. I believe it's still there. Yes.
Yeah, so, and folks will probably be doing an FAQ document to go onto the website along with the recording here to capture some of the things we're talking about. We have someone here that said, okay, so if you're making something with eggs, do the eggs need to be hatched in the US, or is it acceptable to hatch them in another country as long as we raise and slaughter the poultry in the US?
So I guess I need a little more information. Is the egg in this scenario an ingredient in something? Is this like a, I don't know, a bacon key? Is this an egg product, or are they asking about a poultry product?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's why don't you give us a little more background on that, and I'll circle back here. Now, here's a question from Buck Jones. He says, if a tribe has a treaty right to sell products, example, salmon, and they develop their own food codes, labels that parallel or exceed regulatory agencies, can they put those products in commerce or do they need federal approval?
Is if the question's about salmon, I don't know. That's outside our jurisdiction. I guess I heard salmon and I kind of was like, oh well, that's not a FSIS question. But you can, if you want to repeat it again for beef, I'll
Yeah, no, if a tribe, and Becca may do this one in an email here, but it says if a
yeah,
tribe has a treaty rights to sell products, and they're a fishing tribe, so, and they develop their own food codes, their own labels that parallel or exceed regulatory agencies, can they put products in commerce or need federal approval? I'm
yeah,
a little bit familiar with that one, Beth, just because the only aquatic species that is under USDA jurisdiction is catfish.
yeah,
And everything else is under Department of Commerce, essentially. And
yeah.
so the labeling and inspection requirements for those products are much different then. Um, so the other came back here is it's just for poultry. If
Okay,
they're
I
just
got you.
selling chickens or
Yep.
turkeys, yeah,
Yeah. So what we've said was, I always just, it rolls off the tongue easier, born, raised, and slaughtered. So our chicks really born? No, they're hatched. So for purposes of product of USA, it's where the eggs were hatched. So not necessarily. So they, in theory, the eggs could be, laid by chickens in another country and brought over here. So we consider birth to be hatched.
all right, very good, great questions. Oh, what about John Marks wants to know what about salt as an ingredient?
That's a popular question. Salt is technically not a spice or a flavoring by regulation, so salt would need to be of domestic origin. We at this time, that's our policy at this time. We are getting a lot of questions about salt, so we're aware that there's a lot of interest in salt. So
Yeah, yeah, Himalayan sea salt doesn't have the same negative connotation as meat imported from XYZ country. So yeah,
yeah,
excellent question, John. Good to hear from you. Any other questions from folks? These have been some great questions coming in, and if not, we're going to give people about 30 minutes of their day back here shortly. So um, before we put the slide up there, just some closing thoughts. Beth, anything you want to share, other developments within FSIS that would be pertinent for the smaller processors?
I don't really have anything on other. I mean, our main for me in labeling anyway, our product of USA is really front and center right now. It's getting a lot of attention. And it's an exciting claim. But I think, and we touched upon it, is, if you do have to submit a label, I just encourage you to submit it early. I mean, I know I just think it's just, just fair warning, it is taking a bit of time. So please don't, you don't want to let the label approval be negatively impact you. So give it plenty of time. Can't stress that enough.
There aren't as many people working there to
Yeah.
do it as there were. So,
Yeah.
yep, very good advice. Danette, yeah, other thoughts, particularly for our smaller processors out there to help them move forward in the marketplace?
Oh, goodness, Dave, we talked a little bit about protein, and I know to put protein on package takes extra paperwork, extra time. You need to think about how you would label it, but I encourage you to do so because that will make you very competitive in the market, given how much attention is on meat and protein right now. We've got 12% of all US consumers that are on GLP-1s. They need a lot of protein. We're finding now older Americans need a lot of protein, and we've got a lot of boomers. So the value for going through that effort can certainly pay off.
Yeah, and one of the interesting things I noted in the Power of Meat study was that the label product of USA resonates with boomers as the biggest demographic in the package. So,
Yes, if you're looking at generations, boomers are very much about that. Now, the flip side is your Gen Zs, your younger millennials are more interested in not buying products that are from certain parts of the world. For example, they aren't necessarily as concerned about buying Australian meat as they would be meat from, say, South America. So they're using it as a way to exclude products if it's labeled as from a different country as well. We have the chance to work with a wide variety of packers and processors across the country, all sorts of sizes, and we're always trying to help them find their niche and make sure that they can differentiate themselves so they can keep consumers buying their products.
and I'll just put in a plug. Yeah, Biden is one of the leading firms in marketing for, particularly in the meat space. So, yeah, they're available for hire if you're looking to put something together. And Jamie from up in Alaska says, "Thank you for doing this. We're attempting to grow our herds in Alaska, and these conversations are great." So again, Nikki, if you can kind of put that slide up there and let people know how they can get a hold of Beth or Danette, or even contact the help desk at FSIS. Um, so there's their contact information. And if you want to just go onto that QR code, you can learn more about the product of the USA labeling. And of course, Chris Roper and I are always available to help folks through the process here. So don't hesitate to reach out for us. And again, we will be putting together an FAQ document that will be on our website that has some additional information about the conversation we've had today. So, with that, I guess everybody else gets a 20 minutes extra for their day. But I just want to thank both Beth and Danette. This has been a really, really helpful conversation. Remember, folks, you're going to get a 2-question survey. Tell us how we did today, but also tell us what you'd like us to cover moving forward. So with that, thank you, and everybody have a great day. Take care.